I am Mason, 28 years old, and until recently, I was paying my parents $1,800 a month to live in my childhood bedroom while my younger sister Ashley lived rent-free in the room next door. They called it teaching me responsibility. I called it exploitation. When I finally bought my own house with cash, they did not celebrate my success. Instead, they acted like I had betrayed the family. If you are watching this from your parents' house right now, hit that like button and subscribe, because financial independence tastes so much sweeter when the people who should support you try to hold you back instead. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Pennsylvania. My parents, Richard and Barbara, were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable. Dad worked as a sales manager at a car dealership, and Mom was an administrative assistant at a local insurance office. They always emphasized the importance of education and hard work. From an early age, they drilled into me that college was non-negotiable, the only path to success. I was a diligent student, maintaining a 3.8 GPA throughout high school, participating in robotics club, and even winning a regional science competition my senior year. When college acceptance letters arrived, I had several options, including a state school with a partial scholarship. But my dream was Northeastern University's engineering program. It was prestigious, rigorous, and unfortunately expensive. Very expensive. My parents encouraged me to follow my dreams, but made it clear they could only contribute minimally to my education. I understood their limitations and took out substantial student loans, believing the investment in my future would be worth it. I worked part-time throughout college to cover living expenses, often taking overnight shifts at a convenience store and weekends at the campus library. Meanwhile, my sister Ashley, 3 years younger than me, took a different path. She started at community college, studying business, but dropped out after one semester, claiming it was stifling her creativity. She then tried a cosmetology program, but left that too after a few months. My parents, especially Mom, were surprisingly understanding about these false starts, saying Ashley was finding her path. During my senior year of college, Ashley announced she was going to become a content creator. She started posting lifestyle videos and swimsuit photos online. My parents, who had been so insistent about traditional education for me, seemed fascinated by her digital endeavors. Dad even helped her set up lighting in her bedroom for better quality content. When I graduated with my engineering degree, I had approximately $75,000 in student loan debt. The job market was competitive, and while I secured an entry-level position at a respectable firm, the starting salary of $55,000 meant careful budgeting would be necessary to handle loan repayments and establish myself. Moving back home temporarily seemed like the most financially prudent decision. Many of my classmates were doing the same thing to build savings before venturing out on their own. When I approached my parents about it, they agreed, and I was grateful. I anticipated staying 6 months to a year while establishing myself professionally and building an emergency fund. The night I moved back in, Mom prepared a special dinner. It felt like a celebration of my accomplishment, graduating with honors in a difficult field. Dad opened a bottle of wine and we toasted to new beginnings. Ashley was there too, scrolling through her phone occasionally, showing Mom comments from her followers. As we finished dessert, Dad cleared his throat and adopted what I called his manager voice, the one he used when explaining financing options to uncertain car buyers. "Now that you are living here as an adult, we need to discuss household contributions," he said, folding his hands on the table. I nodded, having anticipated this conversation. "Of course. I can help with groceries, utilities, maybe $500 a month until I get established." Dad exchanged glances with Mom. "We were thinking something more substantial. You have a college degree and a professional job now. We believe in preparing our children for the real world," Mom added. "We think $1,800 per month is fair." I nearly choked on my coffee. $1,800. That is more than half my take-home pay after taxes. "Welcome to adulthood," Dad said with a firm nod. "Most people spend 30 to 40% of their income on housing. This is teaching you financial reality." I looked at Ashley, who was conspicuously quiet. "What about Ashley? She is living here too." Mom reached over to pat Ashley's hand. Your sister is building her business. She needs support during this entrepreneurial phase. So she pays nothing, I asked, unable to hide my disbelief. We invest in her content creation, Dad explained. It is a different situation. That night I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by packed boxes I had not yet unpacked, calculating and recalculating my budget. With $1,800 going to my parents, plus $450 in student loan payments, I would have barely enough left for car insurance, gas, food, and professional clothes. Saving seemed impossible. The temporary solution I had counted on suddenly felt like quicksand. The first month living under my parents' roof as a rent-paying tenant was an exercise in extreme budgeting. Every morning I would wake up at 5:30, prepare a simple breakfast of instant oatmeal, and pack a lunch to avoid buying food at work. My commute was 40 minutes each way, and I tracked every mile to optimize gas consumption. I brought my own coffee and a thermos, declined happy hour invitations from coworkers, and canceled my streaming subscriptions. Meanwhile, Ashley's lifestyle continued unaffected by financial constraints. She would sleep until mid-morning, then spend hours creating content in her bedroom or by the pool in our backyard. When she wanted new equipment, a new phone with a better camera, or trendy clothes for her posts, my parents readily provided these business expenses. One evening I came home exhausted after working 2 hours overtime to impress my new boss. In the kitchen I found Ashley showing Mom her latest purchases. "Look at this new ring light. It was only $300 and will totally upgrade my videos," she exclaimed, unwrapping the box with excitement. Mom beamed with pride. "Your dedication to quality is why your following keeps growing." When they noticed me in the doorway, Mom's expression changed slightly. "Mason, there is leftover casserole in the fridge if you want it." "Thanks," I said, noticing the shopping bags from high-end stores scattered around the counter. "Looks like someone had a successful shopping trip." Ashley nodded enthusiastically. "Dad gave me his credit card to get some new outfits for my summer content series." I bit my tongue and reheated the casserole, eating alone at the kitchen table, while calculating how many hours of my work had just gone toward my sister's summer content series. After 3 months of this arrangement, I decided to speak with my father privately. I caught him on a Sunday morning when he was enjoying coffee and reading news on his tablet in the backyard. "Dad, can we talk about the rent situation?" I asked, taking the seat across from him. He looked up, his expression already hardening. "What about it?" "It seems unbalanced that I am paying so much while Ashley pays nothing. I have student loans to pay off too." Dad set down his tablet and leaned forward. "Mason, I want you to understand something. When I was your age, I was already married with a baby on the way, working 2 jobs and paying a mortgage. Nobody gave me handouts." "This is not about handouts," I tried to explain. "It is about fairness. We are both adults living at home." "Your sister is building something from scratch," he countered. "That takes investment and support. You have a degree and a stable job. Different circumstances require different approaches." "But $1,800 is extreme," I persisted. "That is more than I would pay for my own apartment." "Then perhaps you should look into getting your own apartment," he replied, picking up his tablet again to signal the conversation was over. The next day I tried appealing to my mother while helping her prepare dinner. She was usually the more empathetic parent, and I hoped she might see the inequality more clearly. "Mom, I am really struggling with the rent amount," I admitted as I chopped vegetables. "After loans and expenses, I cannot save anything." She paused, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "I understand it is difficult, honey. But your father believes strongly in teaching financial independence." "What about Ashley's independence?" I asked. Mom sighed. "Your sister is in a different position. Content creation is unpredictable. She needs a safety net while establishing herself. You have a secure corporate job with benefits." "But she is making money already," I pointed out. "I have seen the packages arriving with free products companies send her." "That is not the same as a steady paycheck," Mom insisted. "When you were in college, we supported you. Now we are supporting her dreams." "You did not pay my tuition," I reminded her gently. "I have $75,000 in loans." "We let you live here rent-free during breaks," she countered, her tone indicating she was growing uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. It became clear that my parents had constructed a narrative that justified their disparate treatment of their children, and no amount of logical argument would penetrate it. My friend Jake was appalled when I explained my situation over lunch one Saturday. "Dude, that is insane. My parents charged me $300 a month when I moved back after graduation, and I thought that was strict." "$300 sounds like a dream right now," I admitted. "Look, my place has a spare bedroom," Jake offered. "My roommate moved out last month. I could rent it to you for $700, utilities included. It is not fancy, but it is yours if you want it." The offer was tempting. $700 was less than half what I was paying my parents. But something held me back. A mixture of guilt, obligation, and the stubborn hope that my parents might eventually recognize the unfairness of the situation. "Let me think about it," I told Jake. "It is complicated. Family always is," he agreed. "But at some point you have to put yourself first." That evening I returned home to find Ashley lounging by the pool taking selfies while Mom brought her a smoothie. Dad was nearby installing a new umbrella to improve the lighting for her outdoor content. I watched this scene of devoted parental support from the kitchen window, the contrast to my own experience so stark it was almost laughable. That night I created a spreadsheet comparing my current situation with what life would look like if I accepted Jake's offer. The numbers did not lie. Staying was financial self-sabotage. Yet something kept me rooted in place. Perhaps it was the deeply ingrained desire for parental approval, or the hope that my sacrifice would eventually be acknowledged. Whatever the reason, I decided to stay a little longer, but with a new goal to save enough to escape permanently, not just to Jake's spare room but to a place of my own. After deciding to stay, despite the unfairness, I implemented what I privately called Operation Escape Plan. This meant cutting expenses beyond what I had already trimmed, and finding ways to increase my income. I deleted all food delivery apps from my phone, started cutting my own hair, and switched to the cheapest possible cell phone plan. My lunch became peanut butter sandwiches every day, and I began walking the last mile to work to save on gas when weather permitted. Beyond frugality, I pursued additional income streams with single-minded focus. I took on freelance CAD work on evenings and weekends, designing simple components for a former classmate's startup. I signed up for overtime whenever it was available at my main job, volunteering for holiday shifts that paid time and a half. I even spent 2 weekends helping Jake's uncle move his warehouse inventory, earning cash for the back-breaking labor. Every dollar I earned went into a separate savings account I had opened at a different bank than my main checking account. I called it my Freedom Fund, and watching it grow provided a psychological lifeline during this difficult period. The atmosphere at home grew increasingly tense. My parents seemed to interpret my longer work hours as a personal affront, as if I was deliberately avoiding family time rather than trying to build a financial foundation. "You missed dinner again last night," Mom commented one morning as I grabbed a granola bar on my way out. "We barely see you anymore." "I had a deadline," I explained, not mentioning it was for my freelance work. "Family should come first," she replied. "Ashley always makes time for our dinners, even with her busy content schedule." I bit back a retort about how Ashley's busy schedule happened under the same roof, subsidized by my rent money. Instead, I simply nodded and headed out the door. The most painful moment came during a family celebration for Ashley's latest achievement. She had reached some monetization milestone on her platform, and my parents organized a special dinner, complete with champagne and a cake that read, "Congratulations on 20,000 followers." I had been forced to work late that evening to meet a project deadline, but promised to be home by 7:30 for the celebration. Traffic was brutal, and I arrived at 7:45 to find them already eating dessert. "Nice of you to join us," Dad remarked dryly. "We decided not to wait." I texted that I was running late, I said, setting down my laptop bag. "Well, you missed Ashley's announcement," Mom said. "Tell him, honey." Ashley grinned triumphantly. "A swimwear brand wants to sponsor me. They are sending free products and paying me $3,000 for 6 posts." "That is great," I said, genuinely happy for her success, despite our complicated relationship. "Maybe now you will believe this career is real," Dad said, raising his glass in Ashley's direction. "Our daughter is becoming a real entrepreneur." I never said it was not real. I defended myself, taking an untouched slice of cake. You did not have to say it, Ashley retorted. Your disapproval is pretty obvious. I do not disapprove, I insisted. I just think. You just think your engineering degree makes you superior, she interrupted. But guess what I made more last month than your entry-level corporate job paid you? The revelation stunned me into silence. If that was true, the injustice of our living arrangements was even more profound than I had realized. Later that evening, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen as I passed by on my way upstairs. The new ring light and backdrop setup for Ashley's room will cost around $600, Dad was saying. But it is worth the investment. Definitely, Mom agreed. And with Mason's rent payment coming in tomorrow, we can order it right away. I froze in the hallway, their words hitting me like a physical blow. My rent money was directly funding Ashley's career expenses. The pretense of teaching me financial responsibility suddenly felt like a cruel joke. The next day, I confronted Ashley when we were alone in the house. I found her in the kitchen preparing an elaborate smoothie bowl that she was clearly planning to photograph. Is it true you made more than $55,000 last month? I asked without preamble. She looked up, surprised by my direct question. Not quite that much, but close. Why? And you know I am paying $1,800 in rent while you live here for free. She shrugged, arranging berries in a perfect circle on top of her smoothie. That is between you and Mom and Dad. But you know about it, I pressed. Look, Mason, she sighed, setting down her phone. We have different paths. You chose the traditional route. I am blazing my own trail. Mom and Dad are investing in my future. And exploiting mine, I countered. They paid for your SAT prep courses and college applications, she argued. They supported you in different ways. That is not remotely equivalent to free housing and equipment worth thousands of dollars. Maybe not, she conceded, then added with surprising callousness. But it is not my fault. They see more potential return on investment in me than in you. Her words cut deep, revealing a truth I had been avoiding. My sister was not an innocent bystander in this dynamic, but an active participant in the unequal treatment. Whatever closeness we had shared growing up was now thoroughly corrupted by money and parental favoritism. That night I called Jake. Is that spare room still available? I asked. For you always, he replied. When do you want to move in? This weekend, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders even as a new sadness settled in my chest. I cannot do this anymore. When I informed my parents of my decision, their reaction was a mixture of surprise and indignation. You are choosing to pay rent to a friend instead of contributing to your family, Dad asked incredulously. I am choosing to pay less than half the rent for more independence, I clarified. This is about the money then, Mom said, looking disappointed. I thought we raised you to value family over finances. This is about fairness, I corrected her, and respect. If you leave now, do not expect to come back when things get tough. Dad warned, his voice hard. That is not how family is supposed to work, I replied quietly. But thank you for making my decision easier. The day I moved out, Ashley was doing a live stream in the backyard, completely uninterested in my departure. Mom hugged me stiffly at the door while Dad remained in his study, unwilling to say goodbye. As Jake helped me load the last box into his truck, I looked back at my childhood home with mixed emotions. Relief, yes, but also mourning for the supportive family relationship I had once believed in. Moving into Jake's apartment marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. His spare room was small, barely fitting a twin bed and a desk, but it represented freedom. The first night there, I slept better than I had in months, despite the unfamiliar surroundings and the distant rumble of the elevated train that passed nearby every 20 minutes. Jake was the ideal roommate. He worked long hours at a graphic design studio and respected my privacy. We established easy routines, splitting household chores, and occasionally sharing meals when our schedules aligned. Most importantly, my monthly expenses dropped dramatically. With rent reduced from $1,800 to $700, I suddenly had breathing room in my budget. I created a detailed financial plan, allocating my newly available funds, strategically 40% to savings, 30% to accelerated loan repayment, 20% to professional development courses, and 10% to a small lose rated. Quality of life fund. This last category was important. After months of extreme deprivation, allowing myself small pleasures like occasionally eating at a restaurant or buying new work clothes prevented burnout. My professional life began to flourish once the constant financial anxiety diminished. I arrived at work with more energy and mental clarity, which my supervisors noticed. 6 months after moving out of my parents' house, I received my first promotion and a 12% salary increase. Rather than adjusting my lifestyle upward, I maintained my frugal habits and directed the additional income entirely toward savings and debt reduction. Contact with my family became minimal and strained. I called my mother every other Sunday, out of a sense of obligation. These conversations followed a predictable pattern: superficial exchanges about work and weather her updates about Ashley's latest achievements, and thinly veiled suggestions that I should reconcile with my father. Ashley got a sponsorship deal with a fitness drink company, Mom informed me during one such call. They are flying her to Miami next month for a promotional event. That is nice, I replied neutrally. Your father installed a new filter on the pool so her underwater content looks clearer, she continued, apparently not registering my lack of enthusiasm. He is so supportive of her career. He always has been, I observed the words, coming out more bitterly than intended. Mom sighed. He asks about you, you know, in his own way. Has he asked about me directly, or just wondered aloud where his rent check went? I challenged. Mason, that is unfair. We were just trying to teach you responsibility. By charging me market rate rent while letting Ashley live free, that was not teaching responsibility, that was exploitation. These conversations inevitably ended with emotional distance wider than before. Holiday visits became awkward affairs that I limited to brief appearances. I would arrive late and leave early, bearing appropriately generic gifts and deflecting personal questions. Ashley and I maintained a coldly civil relationship during these gatherings, like distant acquaintances forced together by circumstance. Meanwhile, my freedom fund grew steadily. 9 months after moving out, I consulted with a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. Brian Kim was a straight-talking professional who specialized in working with young professionals, navigating early career financial decisions. You are doing exceptionally well for someone 2 years out of college, Brian observed, reviewing my financial statements during our first meeting. Most people your age are accumulating debt, not eliminating it, and building savings. I have strong motivation, I explained, without elaborating on my family situation. Have you considered your longer-term goals? He asked. At your current trajectory, you will have your student loans paid off in 3 years instead of 10. Then what? The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on escaping my parents' financial control that I had not thought much beyond debt freedom. I guess I would save for a house eventually, I said. But that is probably 5 to 7 years away at least. Brian looked thoughtful. Not necessarily. The housing market has some interesting opportunities right now, especially if you are willing to consider foreclosures or properties that need work. I do not have a down payment, I pointed out. Conventional wisdom says you need 20% down, but there are other paths to homeownership, he explained. However, given your savings rate and discipline, you might be closer to having a significant down payment than you realize. This conversation planted a seed that grew into a new obsession. I began researching real estate in earnest, educating myself about market trends, neighborhoods, and financing options. I set up alerts for foreclosure auctions and bank-owned properties within a 30-mile radius of my workplace. 3 months later, an alert caught my attention. A foreclosed 3-bedroom ranch house in a transitioning neighborhood was coming up for auction with a starting bid significantly below market value. The listing included pictures showing a property that needed cosmetic updates, but appeared structurally sound. I immediately scheduled a viewing through the bank's real estate department. The house was better than I expected. Built in the 1980s, it had good bones, as my grandfather would have said. The roof was relatively new. The foundation was solid, and the major systems appeared functional. The outdated kitchen and bathrooms explained why it had not already been snapped up by flippers or other buyers. That evening I ran exhaustive calculations. Between my savings, the recent bonus I had received for completing a difficult project ahead of schedule, and liquidating some investments I could potentially make a cash offer. It would deplete nearly all my resources, leaving just a thin emergency fund, but the mortgage-free ownership would immediately improve my monthly cash flow. The risk was significant. A house inspection might reveal hidden problems. The neighborhood, while improving, still had vacant properties. And emotionally, this would be a massive step, a definitive statement of independence that would likely further strain family relationships. I called Brian for his professional opinion, walking him through my numbers and concerns. On paper, it makes financial sense, he admitted. The price is well below market, even accounting for needed renovations. And with no mortgage, your monthly expenses would be limited to taxes, insurance, and utilities, which should be less than your current rent. But I prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But real estate is illiquid, and you would be tying up almost all your capital. That creates vulnerability if you lose your job or face a major unexpected expense. I considered this soberly. What if I continue living with Jake for 6 months after purchase? I could do basic renovations while building my emergency fund back up before moving in. Brian sounded more enthusiastic about this modified approach. That significantly reduces the risk profile. If you can maintain your current savings rate while preparing the house, you would be in a much more secure position when you do move in. 2 days later, I submitted a cash offer slightly above the starting bid but still well below market value. After a brief negotiation, the bank accepted. I was going to be a homeowner at 30 years old, something that had seemed impossible less than 2 years earlier. The 30 days between offer acceptance and closing were filled with both excitement and anxiety. I told no one except Jake and Brian about the pending purchase, not even mentioning it during my obligatory calls with my mother. The secrecy was partly superstitious, not wanting to jinx the deal before it was final, and partly strategic, wanting complete independence in making decisions about the property. I hired a thorough home inspector recommended by Brian, who spent 4 hours examining every aspect of the house. His report confirmed my initial assessment. The property needed cosmetic updates and had some minor issues, but no major structural or system problems that would require immediate expensive intervention. The HVAC system is older but well maintained, he explained as we walked through the house. You will probably need to replace it in the next 5 years, but it is not an emergency. What about the electrical panel? I asked, noting it looked older than I was comfortable with. It is an older style, but up to code for when it was installed, he confirmed. I would budget for an upgrade, but again, not day one critical. I created a detailed renovation plan, prioritizing projects by necessity, cost, and impact. The kitchen and main bathroom would need complete overhauls eventually, but I could live with them in their current state while saving for those larger projects. Immediate priorities would be refinishing the hardwood floors hidden under stained carpeting, repainting throughout, and replacing a few damaged windows. As closing day approached, doubt occasionally crept in. Was I making a responsible decision, or an emotional one driven by the desire to prove something to my family? Was I rushing into homeownership before I was truly ready? Jake helped keep these anxieties in perspective. Remember why you started saving in the first place? He reminded me one evening when I was particularly stressed about the decision. You wanted independence and security. This house gives you both. But what if I am making a mistake? I worried. What if the market drops, or the neighborhood does not improve as expected? Then you still have a place to live that costs you less per month than renting, he pointed out pragmatically. And you are young enough to recover from a less than perfect investment. The night before closing, I barely slept, running mental calculations and second-guessing myself until dawn. But when I walked into the title company's office the next morning, a strange calm settled over me. Signing my name dozens of times, watching as the bank representative confirmed receipt of the funds, and finally accepting the keys from the real estate agent felt surreal but right. "Congratulations, homeowner," the agent said with a genuine smile. "You got a great deal." Afterward, I drove directly to my new property. Standing alone in the empty living room, keys in hand, I experienced a complex mix of emotions: pride in what I had accomplished through discipline and perseverance, anxiety about the responsibilities ahead, and a lingering sadness that I could not share this milestone with parents who would be genuinely happy for me without complications or conditions. I walked through each room slowly mentally, placing furniture I did not yet own, imagining improvements I would make over time. In the largest bedroom, sunlight streamed through dusty windows, creating patterns on the faded carpet. This would be my room, I decided. My first true adult space, governed by my choices alone. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I took a week of vacation from work to tackle the most critical improvements before moving in. Jake helped me tear out the old carpeting, revealing hardwood floors in better condition than expected. They needed refinishing, but not replacement, saving thousands of dollars in my renovation budget. I learned to do many things by watching online tutorials. Basic plumbing repairs, installing ceiling fans, patching drywall. For more complex tasks like electrical work, I hired professionals but watched carefully, asking questions to understand what they were doing. Each new skill acquired felt like another declaration of independence. Weekends became dedicated to home improvement. I established relationships with the staff at the local hardware store, who began greeting me by name and offering advice on projects. The house slowly transformed not into a showcase home but into a comfortable, functional space that reflected my priorities: quality over flash, durability over trends. 3 months after closing, the house was ready for occupancy. The floors gleamed with fresh polyurethane. The walls wore clean, neutral paint. New energy-efficient windows had replaced the damaged ones, immediately improving both appearance and comfort. The kitchen and bathrooms remained dated but were scrupulously clean and functional. I had kept my promise to rebuild my emergency fund before moving in. With overtime and a small performance bonus, plus continuing to live frugally at Jake's, I had accumulated enough savings to feel secure in my decision. The time had come to move into my own home, and eventually to let my family know about this major life change. Jake helped me move my modest belongings on a Saturday morning. It took only 2 trips in his truck, a reminder of how minimally I had been living. As we carried in the last box, containing my books, Jake looked around the transformed space. "I am proud of you, man," he said sincerely. "You turned a bad situation into something amazing." "I could not have done it without your support," I replied, equally sincere. The spare room made all the difference. So he asked, helping me position my couch in the living room, "When are you going to tell your family?" I had been pondering this question for weeks. "I am thinking of inviting them over next weekend, not telling them it is my house until they arrive." "Bold move," Jake commented. "How do you think they will react?" "Mom will probably be happy for me once the shock wears off," I predicted. "Dad will find something to criticize, and Ashley will be jealous that I did something she has not." "Well, whatever happens, you have accomplished something significant," Jake reminded me. "No one can take that away from you." That night, after Jake left, I sat alone in my living room, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds of my house. My house. The thought still seemed surreal. 2 years ago, I had been paying extortionate rent to live in my childhood bedroom, watching my sister receive endless support while I struggled. Now I owned a home outright with no mortgage at an age when most of my peers were still drowning in debt. I pulled out my phone and composed a text message to my mother. "I would like to have you, Dad, and Ashley over for lunch next Saturday. I have something to share with you." Then I hit send before I could reconsider, setting in motion a confrontation that would either begin healing my family relationships or sever them more completely than ever. The week leading up to my family's visit passed with excruciating slowness. Mom had responded to my invitation with surprise and cautious enthusiasm, saying they would be there at noon on Saturday. I spent the intervening days in a state of nervous anticipation, alternating between hope for reconciliation and preparation for conflict. I cleaned the house obsessively, wanting it to be impeccable when they arrived. I planned and shopped for a simple but impressive lunch, deciding on a menu that required minimal last-minute preparation so I could focus on the inevitable conversation. I even bought new dishes, wanting nothing in my home to remind me of my parents' house. Saturday morning, I woke at dawn, too anxious to sleep. I made final preparations, arranging a fruit platter, setting the dining table with care, and positioning photos of the house from before my renovations where they would be visible. I wanted them to appreciate not just that I had bought a house, but that I had improved it through my own efforts. At 11:55, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched my family emerge. Dad looked irritated already, checking his watch as if confirming I was wasting his time. Mom was carrying a small gift bag, her standard peace offering. Ashley trailed behind them, sunglasses on, phone in hand, clearly documenting the outing for her followers. I opened the door before they could knock. "Thank you for coming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please come in." They entered with the awkward formality of distant relatives at a funeral looking around with poorly concealed curiosity. "This is a nice place," Mom commented, handing me the gift bag. "Just a little housewarming present. Nothing special." "Whose house is this?" Dad asked bluntly, inspecting the newly refinished hardwood floors with a critical eye. "One of your friends." "It is mine," I said, simply watching their expressions carefully. "I bought it 3 months ago." The silence that followed was absolute. Mom's mouth opened slightly in shock. Dad's face reddened. Ashley lowered her phone, her performance momentarily forgotten. "You bought a house," Mom finally managed. "But how? When?" "Cash purchase of a foreclosure," I explained, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. "I have been saving aggressively since I moved out." Dad found his voice, and it was cold. "This neighborhood is not great. The resale value will be compromised." Of course, that would be his first response. Not congratulations, not surprise at my achievement, but criticism. "The area is improving," I countered. "There has been significant investment in the commercial district 2 blocks over, and property values have increased 15% in the last year." Still, he persisted, "You should have consulted someone with more experience before making such a major decision." "I worked with a financial advisor," I said, "and did extensive research." Mom was looking around with growing appreciation. "You have done a lot of work here. It looks lovely." "Thank you," I replied, grateful for the small acknowledgement. "I have learned a lot about home improvement." "Well," she said with forced brightness, "this calls for a proper tour." I showed them through the house, pointing out the improvements I had made, and discussing my plans for future projects. Mom made appropriate noises of approval. Dad continued finding flaws, questioning my choice of paint colors, the kitchen appliances I had kept, the placement of furniture. Ashley remained unusually quiet, trailing behind, and occasionally taking photos when she thought I was not looking. When we returned to the living room, an uncomfortable silence fell. I suggested we move to the dining room for lunch, hoping food might ease the tension. It did not. As we ate, Dad finally asked the question I had been waiting for. "So what did this place cost you? If you do not mind my asking." $120,000, I answered truthfully. "It appraised at $170,000 after the basic improvements I have made." He nodded, processing this information. "And you paid cash, no mortgage." "That is right." "Where did you get that kind of money?" he demanded, his tone suggesting I must have done something illegitimate. "I saved it," I said simply. "When I moved to Jake's, my expenses dropped dramatically. I worked overtime, took on freelance projects, invested carefully." "In 2 years," Ashley interjected skeptically, "that does not add up." "It does when you are not paying $1,800 a month to live in a bedroom," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Dad's face darkened. "So that is what this is about. You are still bitter about the rent." "This is about what I accomplished despite the obstacles," I corrected him. "I am proud of what I have achieved." "You should be," Mom said quickly. "It is impressive, honey." "It is reckless," Dad countered. "Tying up all your capital in a starter house in a questionable neighborhood." Richard, Mom warned, but he continued. "We expected you to be building a career, saving responsibly for the future, not rushing into property ownership to prove some point." "What point would that be?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "That you do not need our help or guidance," he said dismissively. "That you know better than your parents." Ashley chose this moment to rejoin the conversation. "I think it is a bit much," she said, gesturing around. 3 bedrooms for 1 person. It is wasteful when you could have gotten a nice condo closer to downtown." "I like having space," I replied, And the extra bedrooms give me flexibility for the future. Plus, he got an excellent deal, Mom added, trying to be supportive. The investment potential alone justifies the purchase. Dad made a dismissive noise. We will see about that. The market is unpredictable. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I excused myself to bring dessert from the kitchen, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. When I returned with a store-bought cheesecake, I found my parents having a heated, whispered conversation that stopped abruptly when I entered. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down the cake. "Fine," Dad said curtly. "Your mother and I were just discussing some family matters." Such as I prompted, serving slices of cheesecake. Mom looked uncomfortable. "Nothing important." "If it concerns family, it concerns me," I insisted. Dad exchanged glances with Mom, then sighed heavily. "If you must know, we had certain expectations about your financial contributions to the family." "My contributions," I repeated, confused. "You mean the rent I was paying?" "Not just that," he said. "We assumed that as you established yourself professionally, you would help support the family as a whole, including your sister's endeavors." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You expected me to keep subsidizing Ashley indefinitely." "Not subsidizing," Mom objected. "Contributing to family goals." Such as I pressed. Dad looked me directly in the eye. "We had discussed using some of your rent money toward a down payment for Ashley once her online business reached a certain threshold." I nearly choked on my water. "You were planning to use my money to buy my sister a house?" "Not immediately," Mom clarified quickly. "But yes, eventually. As a family, we support each other's success." "When was anyone planning to support mine?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "We gave you a stable home during your transitional period," Dad replied stiffly. "We provided you the foundation to build your career. You charged me market rate rent for a bedroom," I countered, my control slipping, "while giving Ashley everything for free." "Your sister has a different path," Mom began, but I cut her off. "Stop saying that different paths do not justify exploitation." "Exploitation is a strong word," Dad said coldly. "What would you call charging one child premium rent while giving the other free housing equipment and apparently planning to buy her a house using the first child's money?" I challenged. Ashley finally spoke up. "It is not my fault they see my career as more promising than your boring corporate job." "Ashley," Mom admonished, but the damage was done. "Is that really how you see it?" I asked, looking from one parent to the other. "That her path deserves investment, but mine does not." "We are proud of both our children," Mom insisted weakly. "But you invest in only one," I pointed out. "Actions speak louder than words." Dad pushed his plate away, his dessert untouched. "I think we have heard enough ingratitude for one day. You have made your point with this house purchase. You do not need or want our help. Message received." "That is not what this is about," I tried to explain. "This is about self-respect and independence, not rejection of family." "It certainly feels like rejection," Mom said, her eyes filling with tears. "You did all this without even telling us. Made this huge life decision in secret. Would you have supported my decision if I had told you?" I asked. Neither answered, which was answer enough. "That is what I thought," I said quietly. Dad stood abruptly. "We should go. Thank you for lunch." Mom and Ashley followed his lead, gathering their things in uncomfortable silence. At the door, Mom hugged me stiffly. "The house really is lovely, Mason. I hope you will be happy here." Dad merely nodded curtly. Ashley paused before leaving, looking around one last time with an expression I could not quite interpret. "Congratulations, I guess," she said finally. "It is not what I would have chosen, but it suits you." As their car pulled away, I realized that last comment was the closest thing to a genuine response I had received from any of them. Not enthusiastic support, not genuine happiness for my achievement, but at least acknowledgement of it as mine. I closed the door and leaned against it alone in my house once more. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I had anticipated, yet it still left me feeling hollow. I had hoped irrationally, perhaps, that seeing my accomplishment might shift their perspective, might make them recognize the unfairness of their past treatment. Instead, it had only confirmed what I had suspected all along in their eyes. I was valuable primarily as a source of financial support for the family system, not as an individual with my own dreams and needs. The revelation about their plans to use my money toward a house for Ashley was the final confirmation of a painful truth I had been avoiding. I spent the rest of that day cleaning up the barely touched lunch, putting away the new dishes, and sitting quietly in various rooms of my house, reminding myself that despite the painful conversation, I had achieved something significant. This space was mine, earned through determination and sacrifice. No one could take that away from me, not even family members who failed to appreciate its value. The weeks following my family's visit were difficult. Despite the satisfaction of homeownership, I found myself questioning my decisions, wondering if I had acted out of spite rather than sound judgment. The echo of my empty house sometimes amplified these doubts, especially in the evenings when I returned from work to rooms still sparsely furnished and walls still mostly bare. I threw myself into additional home improvement projects to quiet these thoughts. I built bookcases for the second bedroom I had designated as a home office. I planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard, finding unexpected peace in the simple act of nurturing growing things. I installed smart home features that allowed me to control lighting and temperature from my phone, small luxuries that made the house feel more personally mine. Jake visited, often bringing pizza and beer to celebrate each completed project. His steady friendship had been my one constant support through the entire journey, and I made sure he knew how much I appreciated it. "Have you heard from your family?" he asked one evening as we installed a ceiling fan in the living room. "Mom texted to thank me for lunch," I replied, handing him a screwdriver. "Nothing from Dad or Ashley." "Give them time," he suggested. It was a shock. "A shock that I succeeded without their help, you mean?" "Exactly. People do not like having their narratives disrupted, especially parents who think they know what is best for their kids." His observation was insightful. My success had disrupted the family narrative that I needed their guidance and control, that Ashley was the creative entrepreneur, while I was the stable but unexceptional corporate worker. By achieving significant financial success at a young age, I had challenged not just their treatment of me, but their entire understanding of who I was. Unexpectedly, it was my mother's sister, Aunt Carol, who provided the first bridge back to family connections. She called one Sunday afternoon, something she rarely did. "Mason, I heard you bought a house," she said without preamble. "Congratulations." "Thanks, Aunt Carol," I replied, surprised by her enthusiasm. "How did you hear about it?" "Your mom mentioned it at Sunday dinner last week. I wanted to hear more about it directly from you." I described the house and the work I had done, warming to the topic under her genuine interest. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You know, you remind me of your grandfather," she said finally. "He was like you. Determined, self-reliant, good with his hands. He would have been so proud of what you have accomplished." Her words touched something deep inside me. My grandfather had died when I was in high school, but I had always felt a connection to him. He had built his own business from nothing, working tirelessly to provide opportunities for his children, including my father. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with unexpected emotion. "That means a lot. Your parents—" She hesitated, then continued carefully. "They have their own ideas about family and success. Sometimes they lose sight of the individual in pursuit of their vision." It was the closest anyone in the family had come to acknowledging the unfairness of my situation. Coming from my father's sister, it carried special weight. "I have noticed," I said dryly. "Just know that not everyone in the family shares their perspective," she assured me. "Many of us are incredibly impressed by what you have achieved." After that conversation, I began receiving occasional texts from cousins and other extended family members, many asking to see the house or offering renovation tips. These connections helped ease the isolation I had been feeling and provided perspective on my immediate family's reaction. 6 months after purchasing my house, its transformation was remarkable. The kitchen now featured refurbished cabinets, new countertops, and updated lighting. The main bathroom boasted new fixtures and elegant tile work I had installed myself after multiple practice attempts. The backyard had become a peaceful retreat with a small deck perfect for morning coffee or evening relaxation. My professional life continued to flourish as well. The stability of homeownership had allowed me to take calculated risks at work, volunteering for challenging projects that showcased my abilities. These efforts resulted in another promotion, this time to project lead with a corresponding salary increase. My student loans, once a source of constant anxiety, were now on track to be fully paid off within 18 months. My relationship with my immediate family remained strained, but was slowly evolving. Mom had visited twice on her own, each time commenting positively on new improvements to the house. Dad maintained his distance, but his criticism had softened to occasional questions about property taxes or insurance rates, topics within his comfort zone. Ashley and I communicated primarily through group texts about family events, maintaining polite distance. I had heard through Mom that her content creation business was experiencing difficulties as platform algorithms changed and competition increased. I felt sympathy for her struggles but maintained boundaries around financial discussions. The most unexpected development came 9 months after my family's first visit to my home. I was working in the front yard, planting shrubs along the border, when an unfamiliar car parked at the curb. To my surprise, Ashley emerged, looking hesitant and uncomfortable. "Hey," she said, approaching the yard. "Your place looks different." "Landscaping makes a big difference," I replied, standing and removing my gardening gloves. "What brings you by?" She glanced back at her car, then at me. "Can we talk inside?" Once seated in my now fully furnished living room, Ashley seemed at a loss for words. I waited, curious about this unprecedented solo visit. "Your house looks amazing," she finally said. "You have done a lot with it." "Thanks. It has been a learning experience." She nodded, then took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something, and I am not sure how." "Just say it," I suggested. "Mom and Dad are having financial problems," she blurted out. "Serious ones." This was unexpected. "What kind of problems?" "Dad's dealership is struggling with the economy and supply chain issues, and they invested a lot in my business expansion last year." "Your business expansion," I echoed. She looked down at her hands. "I tried to pivot to merchandise, custom-branded products for my followers. It did not go well." "How not well?" "I ordered too much inventory. The quality was poor. There were shipping issues. The whole thing was a disaster." She paused. "They put $60,000 into it." I whistled softly. "That is a significant investment." "They took out a home equity loan," she continued. "Now they are struggling to make the payments. Dad's income is down, and Mom had to reduce her hours at the insurance office because of her arthritis." I am sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely concerned despite our complicated history. "But why are you telling me this?" She met my eyes directly for the first time. "They are too proud to ask for help. But they might lose the house, Mason. The house we grew up in." The implication was clear. She was here to ask for money, not for herself this time, but for our parents. "Have they considered downsizing?" I asked. "Their house is far larger than they need with both of us gone." "Dad refuses to consider it," she said, unsurprised by my practical suggestion. "He says it would be admitting failure." "And what about your income? Could you contribute toward the loan payments?" She looked away. "My revenue is down over 70% from last year. The algorithm changes hit me hard, and the merchandise fiasco damaged my reputation with followers." I sat back, absorbing this information. The family financial dynamic had completely reversed in less than 2 years. Now they were struggling while I was secure. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I inquired, wanting absolute clarity. "I do not know," she admitted. "Help somehow. You are the financially responsible one. You always have been." The irony of her statement was not lost on me. After years of being treated as the less valuable child, my financial stability was now the family's potential safety net. "I need to think about this," I told her. "It is complicated." "I understand," she said, rising to leave. "Just. They really are in trouble, Mason. Whatever happened between us, they are still our parents." After she left, I sat for a long time considering the situation from all angles. The easiest response would be refusal. After the way they had treated me, I had no obligation to rescue them from financial decisions that had privileged Ashley at my expense. Yet complete abandonment did not feel right either. Despite everything, I did not want to see my parents lose their home or face financial ruin in their later years. The next day, I called Brian, my financial advisor, to discuss options. After explaining the situation, I asked for his professional perspective. "You have several potential approaches," he advised. "You could offer a one-time gift to help them catch up on payments. You could structure a formal loan with clear terms. Or you could offer to help them develop a long-term financial plan that might include downsizing, budget restructuring, or debt consolidation. What would you recommend?" I asked. "From a purely financial standpoint, the third option creates the least risk for you while potentially providing the most sustainable solution for them," he replied. "But family dynamics are not just about financial outcomes. You need to consider the emotional and relationship aspects as well." His advice was sound. This situation required balancing financial prudence with compassion, while also maintaining the healthy boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. After careful consideration, I decided on a combined approach. I would offer to pay for a financial advisor to help my parents develop a sustainable plan, and I would provide a one-time contribution toward their immediate mortgage needs structured as a formal loan with moderate interest and clear repayment terms. When I presented this proposal during a family dinner I arranged at a neutral restaurant location, the reactions were mixed. Mom was tearfully grateful. Dad was initially resistant, his pride wounded by the need to accept help from his son. Ashley seemed relieved that I was willing to help at all. "I do not need financial counseling," Dad insisted. "I have managed money my entire adult life." "Consider it a second opinion," I suggested mildly. "Even financial professionals consult with colleagues on complex situations." Eventually, he agreed to my terms, though I suspected it was Mom's influence behind the scenes that secured his cooperation. We signed a simple loan agreement I had prepared, formalizing the arrangement and establishing clear expectations on all sides. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 2 years earlier, I had been paying exorbitant rent to live in my childhood bedroom, watching my sister receive endless support and investment while I struggled. Now, I owned a home outright, had a flourishing career, and was in a position to offer financial assistance to the very people who had once exploited my situation. The bitter satisfaction I had anticipated feeling in this reversal of fortunes was largely absent. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of compassion for my parents' difficulties, cautious hope for healthier family relationships moving forward, and quiet pride in my own growth. Not just financial growth, but emotional and psychological maturity as well. The most valuable lesson from this entire experience was not about money at all, but about self-worth. I had learned that my value was not determined by my parents' assessment or by comparison to my sister, but by my own choices, actions, and integrity. Financial independence had been the visible goal, but the true achievement was the internal freedom from seeking validation from those unable or unwilling to provide it. As I pulled into my driveway, the motion sensor lights I had installed illuminated the path to my front door. The house stood solid and welcoming, a physical manifestation of my journey from exploitation to empowerment. Inside, everything reflected my own choices and priorities, from the color of the walls to the arrangement of furniture. This was not just a financial investment, but a sanctuary I had created for myself, a place where I could continue to grow and thrive on my own terms. Have you ever been in a situation where family treated you unfairly financially? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond to those situations. Thank you for listening, and I hope this story helps anyone struggling with similar family dynamics. Financial freedom is not just about money. It is about creating a life where you are valued for who you are, not what you can provide to others.